I'm John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our friends. Turn off our cell phones and get away. Night or day, it's John DeSando on the radio. We'll watch the credits from up high and low. Cinema Classics on
Cinema Classic is produced and hosted by John DeSando. Listen to shows Thursdays at 8:01 p.m. on WCBE 90.5 FM. And listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Mindy Mcfann.
And this is Cinema Classics.
Yes, it is.
Now, way before you were born, I knew little about opera, which is just a tad less than I know now. My friend Barry is the one who knows all about opera. And I do appreciate it. It's just down the line for me from film and theater.
Right, right.
But one thing I did know when I was growing up was the name Maria Callas.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a diva.
That was my impression,
And
even before.
yes, of the first order.
Yeah.
And so we now have a biopic starring another kind of diva, Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
And what's your impression?
I'm not a big fan of hers as far as in movies.
Yes.
I thought she, because I find her acting very noticeable.
Okay.
I thought she was absolutely fantastic in this movie.
Good.
I thought she disappeared in the first 6 seconds and became Maria Callas. I was absolutely knocked out by her.
Yes.
And it was not my expectation.
Yes, and thank you so much for saying that. I have a feeling that she did it too well.
Mm-hmm.
Because Callas was volatile. I didn't get that in this. I got a more, a cold, a kind of aloofness
Right.
that Jolie was playing her.
Yes. I guess I got the volatility, but not the screaming. But I think that was more I presume when she was performing. I saw the movie as more of the process of her accepting her demise, and I don't think that kind of fight was left in her. She was still obviously a control freak, and you could see that.
That's a good point.
You know, so
Good choice of
yeah, I just thought that was an age thing, where she wasn't screaming to the degree anymore because she didn't have anything to hold over anybody anymore, so she could get away with it. She was hanging on to the last two people in her life, it seemed, and so I think that tempered her temper.
Yeah, and it reminds me that really she was struggling to get her voice back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the movie's really about her last week.
Yeah.
And she's in combat.
Right.
With whatever is her own self.
Yes.
I mean, let's admit, who brought all of that on was pretty much herself.
Yes, and extreme trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty extreme trauma.
And trauma to her voice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, while I tend to listen to doctors
Right.
who advise me in particular ways about my body, she just doesn't seem to want to do that.
Well, I think the way she survived her childhood trauma was she's so hyper-focused on her music that was it. And that is the only thing in her life she knew how to kind of cope with, even though it wasn't a very functional kind of coping.
Right.
And so to have anybody tell her what to do with her music, i.e. her voice, I think she just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
That was the thing she controlled when she could control nothing else as a child, and I think her voice was it. And so anything in the way of it, she just kicked out of the way.
Yeah. She, when you look at Jolie playing Maria Callas, and I agree with you, Jolie is formidable no matter what she does. My only, how shall I say, reservation about her performance was that I couldn't expunge everything that I thought I knew about Angelina Jolie.
Interesting. It got in the way.
It got in the way.
Yeah.
And I think that happens to some superstars.
Absolutely.
And particularly her fight with Brad Pitt, her ex-husband,
Right.
over property, I think a vineyard, and mostly the kids too.
Mm-hmm.
Some of whom have disavowed father
Right,
completely again.
right.
I imagine she's somebody you don't want to lock horns with.
I'm guessing,
I
but
know,
I
I
mean,
know.
that is way beyond anything. I mean, man, relationships are complicated.
Oh, boy, and those high-profile ones,
Ugh.
so I really applaud the choice of her.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently she took months to work on her voice.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that her dubbing or whatever was really well done.
You know, it's.
I mean, that's got to be hard to fake singing opera.
And I think they mixed it
Mm-hmm.
between Collis's and hers. So I couldn't tell, who knows, but it
So
wasn't.
they probably did that so that her throat would breathe, because I was told that's how you can tell if somebody's not really singing, whether their throat expands, if they're just mouthing it.
Oh,
So
okay.
they probably had to have her sing it to some
Sure.
degree so her voice,
Right.
her throat would expand so it would look real.
Yeah, and whatever magic they do.
Yeah, well, God knows now. Who knows what they do?
Right, right.
If her throat was fake, I don't know.
No, I do.
The whole thing was CG, I don't know.
The production design,
Mhm.
Mindy, what's your feeling about that visually?
I thought it really captured a time and really captured the grandeur in which she lived in a decaying way, I guess. A little bit of Sunset Boulevard floating
Very
around
much
there.
so, I think so.
You know?
I think you're right, yeah, she's Nora in some way, yeah.
Yeah.
And her surroundings are palatial.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are.
And
Yes, they are.
It only serves to diminish her somewhat, I thought.
It makes her look lonelier.
Yes,
I mean, because it seems, you can imagine very grand parties being held or something. You do not imagine, I mean, the intimacy takes place in the corner of a kitchen with her servants.
yeah, right. And
So, yeah, the rest of the place is just a stage.
you mentioned those before. I think that the two people you were referring to earlier, right, are her two, which we live in.
She has a butler and a maid.
Right,
Yeah.
butler and maid.
Yeah.
You might have referred
Yes,
to
but
them.
that's seemingly all that's left, because she said didn't have a relationship with her sister.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, but that the paid people were the only people left, and that is the definition of sad.
Ah, wow. One of the images I keep going back to is the butler moving the piano
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
to where she wants it to be, moving it
over and over and over again.
And she's not going to play the piano.
No.
She was actually grew up with the piano, but
Yeah.
but no, and he just dutifully moves it for her.
Absolutely.
That's a
They're
very,
devoted to her, I mean, just devoted.
yeah. So so that's a good way of showing a side of her. But even then, I didn't get any real warmth.
No.
I know.
Oh, I think she shut down when she was 13 years old
Oh my.
and
Yeah.
just turned herself off, which is why, I mean, Aristotle Onassis was a perfect pick to be her one true love or something, because he was completely and totally, absolutely inaccessible. I mean,
You have two control freaks.
yeah. Well, and I think she wanted somebody she couldn't have,
Yeah, and that's.
and that,
interesting
he
way
was a
to look at
guarantee
it.
for that.
Yeah.
I mean, in the middle of their romance, he married somebody else. I mean,
Good Lord.
yeah, yeah.
Would have liked them to explore that a bit more.
Mm.
The Jackie Kennedy connection.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I was reading about him. I can't remember, but that he was obsessed with women who could give him stature. That's why he liked Maria Callas. That's why he liked Jackie Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy's sister and everybody else he hooked up with. But he liked the limelight of them.
Yes.
And grabbing onto that. It
Yeah.
wasn't that he cared about the women, clearly.
Oh yeah, and I love the fact he admits that he's not good looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so he knows his limitation.
He
But
knows he's rich.
yes, boy, he is definitely rich. And he has personality, but he has a confidence that I think at
Guess
some
you
point
could call it that.
right, that at a point she had.
Mm-hmm.
So as you were hinting to, they were a good match in that regard. In that
For
both of
using
them-
each other, yeah.
for using each other. I thought one of the, missing some of the emotion that I really wanted to have more. I mean, for me, even if Maria Callas weren't that personally emotional, I think you could make it up for a film, for a drama. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was talking to my husband about this. I thought it was not a biographical film. It was more of an art piece and talking about the art of her opera and how this woman fit into that. So it wasn't like a regular biography where you get a lot of information.
Right.
Because you got very little information
That's
about
right,
her.
right.
Very little. I mean, they're just snippets of her childhood, snippets of her relationship with Onassis, snippets even of her opera. It was more, I thought, it just wasn't a biography.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to go in that not knowing that. Because
Yes.
if you think it's going to be a biography, you think you're going to find out all these things about her, and that's a letdown.
Yeah.
If you knew going into it, it was like an art piece, I think it would have been read differently.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. You have to be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
The director, Pablo Larraín,
Mm-hmm.
had 2 other films about women. One of them, Jackie,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one, Spencer, about Diana.
Ah, I've seen both those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're both stylized too.
Yes.
Not as much as this one, but
Yeah, yeah. But so you might say Pablo Larraín has a real interest in suffering great women.
yes, but at a distance.
Oh, yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think the other 2, Jackie and Spencer, are women who showed more emotion, if I remember it correctly from that. It showed more emotion than Maria does, at least in this last week.
Well, with the Spencer one, I mean, there's more with her children and such. But I think the commonality is all those women were really in control of their images, for good or for bad. But they were always controlled.
Yes.
Was their how they got through, I think.
Well, Mindy, we have more to say, actually. You
Well,
will
of
believe that.
course.
Yeah. And so people need to go to our podcast, and this is going to be double take.
Okay.
You have to go to WCBE.org and look at the podcast experience, and then you can hear more about what we have to say about this fabulous woman, Maria Callas, this controversially bright actress, and the director, Pablo Larraín. So now, what do you advise our audience? Maria's on Netflix, which means it's immediately available to many people. What do you advise?
It's beautiful. Go into it knowing, though, it's kind of an art piece, and you're not going to find out everything you want to know if you want to know anything about Maria Callas, but especially if you like opera or just like interesting women.
And I'm glad you brought that up. You don't have to know opera the way my buddy Barry List does. But just be prepared for what you had said, and it doesn't make any difference if she was an Olympic swimmer or whatever. It is about a great woman,
yes,
and about her struggles, and especially
what she sacrificed.
taking her grand gift, which is her voice, and losing it in her 50s.
Yeah.
I'm John DeSando.
Cinema, 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 cinema. Classics, let's go to the movies and share some